Oh, hello, Mr. Powell.
Hello, can you hear me now? Test, test, test.
I can hear you now.
Okay, awesome. Hey, Denise, how you doing?
Good. Have you been talking the whole time?
I was talking for a little bit, a good minute, and then I realized that I was muted. So, but yeah, yeah. I hope things have been well for you. I will go ahead and share my screen. Where's Firefox? There it is. All right. Okay. Yeah, pinged Andrea as well because there was a few things I wanted to get
Oh, yeah. Me.
his review on as well. 21st, I think. Yeah. This.
Just at the notes thing. What do I do with it? It's just staring at the notes.
Oh
Just.
yeah. I'll put it in the chat in case.
Oh, okay. Thanks. I
Yep.
just don't
There
know.
we
Yeah,
go.
there it is. Okay. No, that's the. I think I'm in it. Yeah, we'll say that that's it. Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yep. No worries. No worries. All right, let's go through.
And how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, doing all right. Just trying to get all the stuff up to speed in CD
All the stuff?
events.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just like trying to get the website. I've been getting the getting started page almost done. So once
Okay.
that's done, I can.
Oh, did you update like the there's been some requests for more documentation about CD events from some of the people that we're talking to in the sales in Linux sales. So as you're cleaning that stuff up, let me know because
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's
Yeah, I was
interesting.
actually gonna send it to you just so because
Okay.
yeah, because like it's gonna change a little bit of like the format of the website because
Okay.
yeah, it's just we just need to make it up to date. But yeah, I'll send you that info soon.
Okay.
Um, so yeah, so I think I wanted to go over some of these PRs first because one thing I've noticed, and I want to get your opinion on this because so we have all these different types of events and some of them are not consistent and um Andrea is on he's on of this philosophy and I think it's a completely valid philosophy, but it's more of like which side of the philosophies that we want to take on. So basically his concern with making things consistent is if the tool doesn't um if the tools don't line up semantically uh the same way, he thinks that they probably should remain inconsistent. Um and the other philosophy, which is who Brett Smith over here mentioned that instead of trying to like have cater to each specific subject to having its own pass fail because they all have the same descriptions, just they use a different nomenclature to describe it. And I am of the opinion that if it's a different nomenclature just to describe it, we should just normalize it. It doesn't matter what the subject matter is, right? Because it's our take on the subject and the predicate. But like I said, I don't want to discount, if people feel very strongly about a subject having its own semantics, that it can be inconsistent, but that makes it very, from a developer standpoint, when you're writing out the code, you now have to kind of guess or go to the documentation as opposed to like it being just consistent, right? So that's why I lean more towards that, but it's more of just, whatever philosophy we choose, we need to stick to and make that part of the guidelines for the website is what I'm getting back to as well. So what's your philosophy on this? Did you see?
Okay. If I think I understand what you said, it sounds like there are some processes that are specific to like enterprise structures that you want to be able to account for. If I had to guess, where the original when I first joined, the SIG and first started looking at this. Actually, when you and I were at that very first meeting
Mhm.
in Houston, right? I
Yeah, yeah.
keep forgetting that you were there with me. It seemed like to make this thing work, it had to function as the tools functioned,
Hmm.
and as the way that we spoke about the tools functioning, right? And as long as we captured that, then that's the base that everyone could build from. The direction that I am building towards is just an open inheritance structure. So the concepts of I need to little be a little bit different are covered as long as the base things are concerned. And as long as you're inheriting from a base event, if
Hmm.
you have a special needs event, like specific to your company or specific to your process, you can add that event in without breaking the paradigm of CD events. That is how I've always looked at solving the problem. That's what I put into the two um, issues that I put up that my team's working on,
Hmm.
is solving first that inheritance issue where any data or any process that you want to be able to bring, you should be able to bring. We just say these are the base things in these areas and explain that subject handles this portion of it and context handles this portion of it, and explain those super clearly. But we don't really, because you can build from inheritance, and you can create your own events on the fly. There's no point in trying to force that. It's more like, hey, do it this way. And so if they do go off the rails, they're off the rails. But when it comes to Conduit, Conduit will see those events as, you know, fine because it's inherited from an actual CD event and it follows that process. As long as the people who are writing code against it on the other end understand what that data that you've added to the object is, then you're fine. And it's always enclosed. And I think part of the thing about CD events that um, I respect that they were trying to capture is that every company is going to want to operate a little bit differently, and it
Hmm.
needs to be flexible enough to capture that. And so trying to capture everything in the events that's local to, the foundation doesn't make sense. What makes sense is a structure where companies can say, we need these things. We don't think that they need to be for everybody, but we need them. Or groups of companies can say, hey, no, we all want this particular thing, and they can literally use the ability to extend their own events to create their own things. We had talked about having like a repository for experimental events. Like all of those things kind of line up in the same way that says there should be a set that's governed by the group that says this is the base functionality of a tool, and then an open inheritance that lets people build from that so that they can add their own types of events in the tools. One of the things that my company's looking at is other use cases for this type of orchestration system, or this type of orchestration semantic. And it actually has a lot of other applications. Um, so yeah, I'm for keeping it as minimal as possible in the public area because keeping it minimal means that we are servicing the things that absolutely have to be there, and we can build a foundational language from that. As
Yeah,
long as we
yeah.
can inherit from that openly, and companies can inherit from that structure and then build what they need on top of it, then it solves the greater problem of making CI/CD efficient, and the focus has got to be efficiency in the AI age, right?
Yeah,
Everyone in
yeah.
the AI age is like worried about their job or worried about this coming from them. But these systems in the SDLC space, they're so super complicated that AI is having a problem with it. If we make this process more efficient and give the whole thing a language that people can inherit from and create from that solves their problems, then they can have their AI speak efficiently to this layer, and understand what everything's going to do because we kind of section that together in context across the whole board. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I am for a super simple base structure, being really, really strict and adhere to what the tools do. And concepts like rollback can be programmatically implemented in an open system based on what those companies' needs are, and or based on what the tools needs are. Like let's say you're a harness and you wanted to build your own version of like a rollback system that had, different fallback postures, right? You'd want to be able to have the event structure be set up in a way that using the existing events that are there. You have all of your base information, but then you could make your own proprietary events and say, hey, this is how we're handling these things. This is how we're signaling the system that the rest of the world doesn't have. That way they don't lose their ability to be a vendor and be successful. And so when I was doing this from the Apple perspective, that was a big portion of the conversations that I was having with the vendors is like, how do I protect you so that you still have your creative space to, build onto the tool, build onto the concept, but also be able to protect your ability to make money. And so, yeah, it needs a structure that's kind of open, but also stacked in a way, which is why I went with the one-way inheritance, but
Mhm.
stacked in a way so that the things that are the community expects to be there are always there, but then everything else is additive. And so that you can add as a vendor, and then your customers can add on top of that. And then the namespacing kind of handles that problem. And yeah, you just kind of inherit it from there and go.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And I'm definitely on the same page with you on that. But I think I was asking something a little bit more fundamental. Giving a concrete example here. So in testing events, right? It's called pass, fail, cancel, error.
Mm-hmm.
But in orchestration events, it's just success, error, or failure. So success and pass, those are technically semantically equivalent. It's just in tests they call it pass. So Brett was wondering whether or not we should just make it everything consistent. If something succeeds, we just call it a success rather than having,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a level of nitpick I'll never get to. Um,
Gotcha, gotcha.
Seriously, dude. I mean, it's like, yeah, what you label that, I think if we that's a great call out though.
Hmm.
Um, I think that should probably be value based, where it's like an enum or something where it's like, there's a number associated with it, and what the label is, we don't really care about. I think that would probably be a more consistent way to handle that
Hmm.
because I get exactly what the problem is. And that is back to the overall problem of all language, right? Is that we say things that mean different things. And part of understanding how to work with humans and the struggle that AI is having is because we say the same thing different ways and also say things differently with the same words. You know, our context is and intent is always hard to figure out.
Yeah, yeah.
And this is just another example of that because it is a positive outcome. And
Hmm.
so, I mean, should we just label it positive outcome?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, but
Call it
I
what you want to call it.
yeah, and what's interesting too is like because if you see pass and success, like those
Hmm.
mean technically the same thing, but we
Hmm.
have failure and fail. So that's
Hmm.
also an inconsistency. And then cancel and error, those remain the same, right?
Yeah.
Well, cancel doesn't live in core, but it becomes what I was wondering is if we have a set of outcomes which we just deem as correct verbiage, right?
Hmm.
That describe the action.
Hmm.
Um, that people can just choose, I think would be sufficient. But the enum to integer also works. That way you can just stick whatever label you want on there, and just when it gets down to the byte level, it's just just a zero or a one. It's all that's also
Yeah.
fine, right? Um, so yeah, I'm just kind of curious because like from a governance perspective, whatever we land on, we just need to make sure that we write it somewhere. So that's been my big
Yeah.
thing is we write
Yeah. No.
whatever rules. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a no-win scenario, unfortunately. Like both ideas are right. Having it all
Hmm.
be consistent is absolutely the right thing to say. But also, like, no, but we called this pass failed and this one over here success and not success. But that's the semantic communication that we're having in the companies that we talk about this as. And so we don't think of a deployment as pass fail, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right? You think of it as being successful or, well, failed is still a thing, but like you just also mentioned with the failed and errors and like the different, some error conditions are errors where there's no failure though,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you have to be able to account for that as well. Yeah, I think that hmm, I would be more inclined to say, um, leave it as is and write around it because it fits that expectation and have the community itself more than just this core group try to make that decision. Like, let's work on bringing more people to the table. And
Mhm.
hopefully, as we bring more companies to the table, we can have bigger conversations about that and open that up. But I don't see, I don't think it's worth changing everything at this point to say we just wanted to make it consistent.
Yeah, well, I'll give
Um,
you here's the PR that I'm looking at. So this originally the outcome for task run was just a string with no enum on it.
mhm.
So I was like, well, it probably should be an enum, right? We don't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
just anyone putting anything in there. And so Andrea called out, um, those two issues regarding like tests. And I think he was just calling it out, just kind of talk about, just kind of give a little bit of context.
Mhm.
So personally, I think this is a good idea. Um, but he was wondering how does that model apply to like task run, like when something fails or when something has an error, for example, right? Um, and
Right.
those
I
are
actually think the outcome should be an object.
an object.
Yeah.
Let me think. So if the outcome was an object, what would that look like? It'd be you probably have a failure type
In
and
the
maybe a
right,
fill. Yeah.
because if it's an object, then you'd have to know what the object was for. Um, the person writing the code. But I do like the enum thing too.
Mhm.
But if it's a string type, but you're just filling it with an enum, or
Yeah,
why
yeah.
is
So
it
there's
actually?
stringed enums in
Okay.
languages like Java allows you to have string enums. Go allows you to have string. So like this is a new like well, I wouldn't say new, but it's like a newer pattern of enums rather than having enums just be like a number. Like
Right,
people
right.
started. So in pipeline run we have this in
Mhm.
and everything that in is an outcome. They're all the stringed enums except for
Okay.
task run. That's why I was like, oh, that's really weird. We should probably make that also an enum. Um,
So
so
what was it? It was just a string before?
it was just a string before, correct?
Okay. Interesting.
So that's the change. But I think Andrea is just wanting to understand how these verbiage is mapped to the tooling, right? So
Yeah.
what does a success mean, right? Which is completely valid, right? So what
So
I
is that what you're going to do? Like make sure that every tool on the planet
Oh, no,
hits
no,
that
no. What I'm
paradigm?
going to do, so I told him down here, is I'm going to add inside of that defs folder, just like
Hmm.
what they're supposed to mean, and just have the definitions there, and kind of go at it from that angle because, like I'm not going to, try to figure out what all tools are doing, like for success and failures, right? So I'd rather just have our definition of it and people that are using CDEvents just have to say, oh, this is their definition of it. So when a task fails, it needs to adhere to this cancel or this error, right, or this failure type.
Yeah,
Um,
but that it lies the problem of, well, I mean, I guess if you are setting up the events on the tools for the first time and your tool has a task run and you are trying to choose what event to publish, you'll have to convert your thing to ours. And I guess it's not any more programmatically difficult unless, of course, we don't cover
that yeah,
something
space,
that you
yeah,
want to cover. And so that's the only risk that I see to that, is there is nothing to say, custom,
right, right, yeah, yeah.
right?
Um,
And then with the enum, is there also more descriptive information that you can give with the enum? Is there a message that you can send with it, or is it just the enum?
no, it's just the enum. So we wouldn't send the description. We would have so this is going to be another thing that I've been thinking about. But I'll give you a little bit of what I've been thinking about. So rather than trying to give a description, I think what we need to do is have failure types or error types, like as a concept. Like,
Mhm.
so we would have like a failure type of like gated failures, which is, like a manual judgment gets denied, for example, or you have like a canary analysis type, which we would call like a metric failure, right? So those would be failure types. So you'd bundle those things together. And then we might have like another one that's just called other that, we might not cover that people could use, and maybe you could put a message in there. But the idea is rather than having things be prescriptive where people would have to like read the message to like figure things out, we would have a descriptive failure type to kind of like adhere to these grouping of types of failures. So I think that's probably how we could solve for that. But like I said, I'm still working out the details in my head. And like I said, like
Yeah, the thing that I was talking about is more like, um, well, okay, let's from a conduit perspective, what conduit is actually doing is essentially any code that you would write in a tool, you are basically writing it at conduit. And so any of the error messages that come out of that tool, you need that data to be able to surface that to the people who use it, right? And so um, if a failure at that gate is because of the system, or if the failure is at the gate because of a denial, you still need the full human readable context to give back to the humans who are using the tool on the other end. And so that's what I was talking about the error message. Like we
yeah, but
don't,
that's not really an SDLC fact though. That's a tool fact, right? But that's not an SDLC fact. So that's why I'm a little bit
no,
hesitant.
it is a tool fact, and that's the point I'm trying to make. It's a tool fact that you want to surface at the level of where um, conduit sits.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, for
because
sure.
all of those tool facts have to be in the system itself because it's just a tool extension. We're
Mhm.
literally just extending what's happening in the tool over in another spot and writing the code there because you have access to the entire ecosystem, right? It would be the same as being able to sit at a tool and call a bunch of APIs from all over the place to get context about what's going on in the rest of the system. But instead of that, you just take that information and move it to the system, and you do it that way because it's more efficient, right? And so everything is more about how do we make the process efficient so that the point of communication is centralized in a way that an AI can say, oh, I can see everything that's going on from here and I can make adjustments and understand how these tools interact. And you get that consistency of, oh, build means build everywhere, regardless of how we interact with those tools. Those same kind of meetings are set up in the morphemes
Yep,
in
yep.
that context. So it's still you would need to surface that information. I mean, you could do it in a way that says, okay, there was an error. Now go back and query to get the details of the error.
Yes,
Um,
correct.
you know, but that's an extra step for something that you knew at the time you created the event and sent the event over. So the question is, do you want a second call for that? And that's also why I was saying, oh, an object might be better there because if you wanted to carry more detail um, in what the outcome was, you could, right? That
Well,
would be completely up to the person sending the message. And if that object didn't have an optional message, then that's fine. It doesn't have to have the message. It can just have the thing where it's the type like you were just talking about. But whether or not it carries the message is like not really that big of a deal to us, the people here in this group, because it's one of those things
right,
that can be
but
optional, right?
so CD events is something that measures the SDLC. It's not really tool specific, right? So like anything that's tool metadata like that should probably live in a different layer. So like
I disagree.
well, because freeform text is very dangerous inside of an event. So that's another issue, right? So you can't query it. It can make events very, very large. So there's multiple issues with it, right? Like I understand it from from a service perspective, like why you'd want to do it. But from a governance perspective, from CD events, where CD events' whole goal is to measure like to describe the
Does it
software
measure
delivery
anything?
life cycle, the message is not needed to reconstruct the software delivery lifecycle. So that's like one of the basic tests for whether or not something's really meaningful inside of an event. And a message is not one of those things. And so if we want
Well, I
to,
think, yeah, if you're using it for just eventing, perhaps that is
well, it's called
a
CD
paradigm.
events. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I know it's called CD events, but what you call a
well,
thing and what it is and how you use it are not always the same thing.
yeah,
And
for
that's how
sure.
you learn new things, right? People try
No,
new
no, yeah,
stuff and
but
they do new
let me
things.
finish, please. Because like what I
Okay.
was getting at though is that CDU event is defined as an SDLC eventing schema, right? If we want to change that,
Where?
look, it's in the primer.
It's in the primer.
Yeah. Let me see. Where is that? Mm, uh, oh, maybe this just describes like where it's built, but it's somewhere. I just need to find it. That messages, uh, uh, integration pattern defined by the book. Yeah, integration patterns, building, deploying message solutions. Yep. And propagate these events. Uh-oh.
And isn't this the part where we're cleaning this up and getting this to line up better with what it actually does?
Part of it, right? Well, the goal is to first describe the constraints and whatnot, like is or like what the best practices is. Well, either
Mhm.
way, like I'll find um uh the information. I
Yeah, and
think
isn't that the whole point of like custom data to decide, let the people decide what they want to be
yes,
able
yes,
to put
and
in
but
and
that's my
out?
point. Like inside of the core event, message wouldn't be a field, but in custom data, it could be,
Yeah.
right? Like that, I'm not discounting, but I'm just saying, like as a core, like when you were saying, like, oh, have that be an object or message. That's where I'm like, oh, we probably don't want to put it there. That's what I
Well,
meant by wrong
but
layer.
that's also what I was talking about inheritance. That one-way inheritance where, okay, we concern ourselves with the base structure and say these are the minimums and the things that we expect in it. But if someone in their schema adds more, then they should be able to add more, regardless of what it is, right? Because they're the ones that are building around it, not us.
I mean, sure, but you know, we're talking only from a perspective of like CD events. What other people do with it, we can only govern like what we know about CD events, right?
Hmm.
So your company, on the other hand, can handle that, right? But like from strictly a governance perspective from CD events, right, where we're measuring the life cycle of these events, right? That these, like I said, like why that's why building out these getting started like page and whatnot, we need these like concrete rules. And if the rules are too strict, we need to loosen them or loosen them in a way where they satisfy people's needs, but we need to start somewhere. And that's why like I'm starting here because like I don't know what else, however else people are using things. But once this is out as a PR, then I think we can start tackling those questions, kind of figure out where does message belong, et cetera, right? But like based off of the current getting started guide right now, free-form text is not uh I labeled as like not an okay thing to put inside of a CD event.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, just because like it makes querying impossible and makes events potentially large, right? So that's the biggest issue. But either way, like I said, and okay, so this
Why does it
PDF,
make querying impossible?
well, it
Or are you
makes
saying,
querying difficult because so you have to query, let's say you're curious about something inside of that, like when you have a JSON blob, you're like searching for a particular JSON field inside that JSON. It's the same thing. If you're interested in a particular message, or let's say like it's a stack trace message, which is very common in Java, you might be interested in one particular portion of that stack trace as opposed to the whole message, right? So when you query for that, you would have to get the whole message back, and then parse through it to figure out which individual piece that you want. So, um,
but but because it's an event that's coming from the system, you would still have to know which event you were looking for. And so really you would only be querying for the event, not for, unless you were trying to do something comparative with the messages, like you wanted all the messages of a certain type, then yeah, that's completely different. But even then, that's use the API, go to the system itself to get that kind of context. An event is this happened in this moment, this thing that we are reporting, it's just specific to that event. So querying
exactly,
around the
exactly. So
fields
message doesn't,
themselves
yeah,
doesn't make any sense anyway, because the only thing you're interested in is the fact that the event was triggered. And so I guess where I get lost is, like you said, it's not queryable, but that's not the context. There's no context that I am aware of, in at least in the systems that we're trying to build, where you're trying to find this by searching through the events. If it's a error of a specific type on a tool, you would query that tool directly for those messages, right? That is a great example of something where you would go to the source and go, hey, source, give me all the messages of this type on that tool, if that's what you were looking for. But if it's like on the event itself and you're just trying to take action against something that happened, having the full context of that information available keeps you from re-querying the system for things that you know you're going to need. And I think that's part of the way that we're looking at the event as
Yeah, yeah.
just a
And I think,
slice of time, and then not
yeah,
having to think about things about like going back to query all the messages. So I guess that's why I was lost with the querying thing because I can't think of a reason why you'd want to do that.
yeah, yeah. So and it's completely understandable, but let me rephrase the question. Would you would you think that no one would ever try to query a message and parse through it? And if the answer is yes to that, then that's good enough, right?
Yeah, I like I just said, I don't see a reason that even if you included the messages in the events and you took all of those events that you had, put those in a database, and then said, oh, I want to find all the events that have this particular message because that message is going to be tool specific, you would always query that at the tool itself, right?
Right, right.
That's the source of truth. I mean, technically you could, but why would you want to do that? In that context where you can just query the tool specifically to get the data from the source that understands it, if that's what the tool, if the tool is keeping that information. But like most error messages, it probably is going to like end up in a log somewhere and not stored in a DB.
Mhm.
So it's like you're danged if you do and you're danged if you don't,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Yeah, yeah. But either way, I think the next steps with that is like first looking at the getting started page and specifically looking at the constraints and
Mhm.
seeing if it lines up with like our philosophies. And we don't need to get it right the first time, but
Right.
what I was telling Andrea,
Hello? Oh, I lost you.
oh, sorry. When I was talking with Andrea is uh I mentioned that right now we're too open and we want to oh give me one sec.
Mhm.
Sorry, my headphones broke. It's
Oh,
like
dude, so sorry.
yeah, the earpiece, like it's like a headset, but
Mhm.
the things that go on your ears, one of them just fell, like fell off. So, um, anyways, so what I was getting at with Andrea, so we with these constraints that we have, we can always start out strict and then open them up. Like that's safer. But if we start too open and we try to make it more strict, that's a breaking change. And so that's what I wanted to do. But like I said, but if it's too strict, then we definitely want to alleviate that. So I think the next steps, just so we're all on the same page and we're all aligned on what constitutes like an actual event, like what should be in there.
Mhm.
That PR will come out probably like in the next week or so. And that will help this discussion. Does that work?
Yeah, no, that works.
Okay.
I definitely am not saying, hey, don't do it, don't bring it. That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, for the conversation from my perspective, um, it is more about, hey, let's figure out what the minimums are in the group.
Mhm.
Say, hey, this is how it works. And then if someone added that field themselves or a tool added that field themselves anywhere, whether they put it in context subject or whatever as a part of how they wanted to do it, that the system itself should not preclude them from doing it. That's all that I am saying.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think the thing so for me is like a core CD event. That means the CD events that we maintain have
Hmm.
a very strict set of rules.
Hmm.
But if you want to introduce something that is outside those strict set of rules, that needs to be a custom event. Like that's the whole key thing, is because we want to keep the core events very specific in scope and very specific in goal is the point. So yeah, but either way, you're absolutely right. We don't want to definitely preclude people, but we want to make sure that we have a common goal and common constraints. That way, when new events come out, right, like we're all adhering to the same, the same standard, the same page, and the same consistency. So that's the whole point of it. Is more of, it's not trying to like preclude people. It's just like, because when I was talking with Matt Goggerly, I was like, oh, I'm telling him the same thing, but some of them I was like, oh, but Andrea is okay with it this way, and then I was like, but I'm okay with it this way. What's the right way? And that's why I decided to start this doc. That's a little bit of context there. So that's what happened. I was like, oh, if we just had a doc where we could just point to people, that makes it a lot easier than telling people by hearsay every single time.
Yeah. Okay.
So okay. And then the other PR was this one, which is merging. So this is going to be probably
Yeah.
a breaking change for you, Didisi. So I wanted you to take a look at this. So one thing that David had suggested is merging subject source and subject ID into the subject ID. So having those be one and the same, but concatenated. So they,
Oh,
yeah.
that's horrible. Why would you do that?
So his reasoning was because subject source is optional, it's hard to know when you should check for it. So that was his argument. Um, I'm of the opinion that they should be separate, I'm
Yeah, that
also
doesn't make any sense because
but
it's
I'm also
optional.
of the opinion though subject source should also be required, not optional.
Well, I am of both of those. I'm with you on
Yeah.
both of those, but the my point was more about what David would just said. Like it's hard to know when to check for it. It's a field with a key. If you just check for it, I mean, it's programmatic. You can literally just say, "Does
Check
this
for it.
key
Yeah,
exist?"
yeah.
And then you're off to the races. This is not rocket science. So I too think that they should both be there and both separate. Um,
Okay, so let me put that here. So
oh yeah, you
um
want me to put it there?
yeah, we can, yeah, like you can put it there and then I could just give you a thumbs up. I think that
Oh
would be
no, you know
better.
what? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, not but you're in there, so I was going to say I would give you
Oh,
the thumbs
thumbs.
up.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that works too. So during uh
Uh, and I'll just like say, hey, yeah, this seems kind of weird. I think that we should keep them both, and I'll add on to what you're saying, whatever, regardless of what you say. Okay,
yeah.
but I do think we should keep them both and move towards having the strict. Um, and there might actually be because what we have is sets of required fields for interoperability.
Hmm.
And that's how I was approaching it. I mean, even originally when I talked about this, I had always talked about it in the concept of, oh, as long as the base CD event stays open, then if I have strict events for interoperability and working with Conduit, that's a choice. But then the groups push was like, no, it should, like, everybody should do it. And I'm still of leaning towards like keeping regular CD events super open and just doing a completely different interoperability
EMA.
standpoint,
Yeah.
because that even fits in with what you were just talking about before this, and letting us keep those events really, 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 really lean
Hmm.
as what's in the open source community for people who want to use CD events for eventing, because some of the things that we're doing really makes eventing kind of like, why would you ever do that? And so you
Yeah,
might
yeah.
not want to start, it's not something you really want to mix and match. And so as long as the core helps and does what everybody needs, and there's a base event, that covers most of the needs that we have, because then we could describe it any way we want. And say this works with this particular system and make as many fields as we want strict and also required. But it the fields that are always required in CD events would of course always be there. So
Yes, yes, correct, correct. And then this is the other PR. Yeah, so yeah, let me know what you decide on that too, dude. See, I'd be curious to see where you land on that.
land on which?
The whether you end up going the interoperability schema
Well,
versus yeah.
yeah, that's the only schema we're doing is the interoperability. That's
Oh,
the
I
only
didn't
thing
know
that
if
my
you
company's doing.
decided on that. So you did make a decision. Okay, okay. I wasn't sure.
Well, no, I did that before I moved. Yeah, we did that last summer, dude.
No, no, no. But I thought oh, sorry. I thought that was something completely different. Okay, so that is the same thing. Okay, that's
Right.
that's good to know.
It,
I thought. Yeah, yeah. Because in the last SIG, you were like, oh, we're gonna, potentially use a interoperability schema, and I was like, oh, is that something different? But it is the same thing.
Right. We've always been working
Okay.
towards the interoperability schema. What I was saying, I think we went through a period, I think in December or so, November, December, where I was saying, hey, I'm going to come up with these very strict events for interoperability. Where do you want me to put it? And it was like, are we going to maintain a separate spec? Or, and once I started doing it, it's not that much of a difference. It's literally just a schema where some more fields are required. And
Mhm.
so maintaining it separately really isn't that big of a deal, because it's can be inherited from the existing one with the extra required fields. Um, so yeah, that's where my mindset was, whatever was more convenient for the group. In
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay.
in that time period where we were talking about it as a group, I was still at Apple. The statements that came back was no, let's just make the interoperability schema the schema. But like now, even in the things that you're talking about now, or like in David's work, there should be a way to let everybody still use, I don't want to, I guess what it is like, I don't want to say, oh, everybody has to change because I'm doing a thing. That doesn't make any sense. Um, and I think that was always my biggest feeling about it. Like I'm not doing this to try to say like the world should do what I'm doing. It's like, no, I want to offer this opportunity for you to like, be more efficient and improve. But if you want to
Mhm.
keep doing what you're doing, keep doing what you're doing. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. And like I said, your feedback's always valuable to DC. That's why, like,
Thank you. That
yeah,
was
I
very
wanna,
nice.
yeah,
I
no,
think
that's
your
why,
feedback is valuable too. That's why I listen to you.
yeah, thanks to DC. Yeah, that's why I was wondering like what you landed on, but I just did not know that it was the same thing that we've always talked about in the past.
Yeah.
But that's good to know. Okay, awesome. So I know we went through a bunch of PRs, and I realized we only have like 15 minutes left. So I
Mhm.
wanted to before we still have other PRs, but we can always address those later. Was there anything that you wanted to talk about today? Just so I leave some space
That
for.
is also very nice of you. I appreciate that more I
Yeah.
can tell you. No, I just came because it was the meeting and I wanted to, like, I'd missed the last one and I felt bad about missing the last one, but yeah, our junction box stuff is almost done. Hopefully I can demo it to this group before we're supposed to
Ooh,
do the actual CDCon demo. That's
okay.
my goal. Um, Yeah, and it's super simple, in the sense that all it's really demonstrating is the leveraging the consolidation to do other coding against, which is the whole point of Conduit and the whole system of interoperability. But
Mhm.
it should be a great demonstration of, yeah, how interoperability can work when we finish it. Um, yeah, dude, it's weird.
Yeah,
It is
I'll
so
be
weird.
super excited to see. And you're demoing it for CDCon, right?
Oh
You
yeah, no,
said?
we're
Okay.
definitely going to, yeah, it's going to be what we do. It's the
The
my
talk?
keynote. Yeah, my
Oh, okay.
keynote
Awesome, awesome.
in CDCon. And then I'm waiting to hear back from the UN.
Great, great. Okay, well, yeah, keep us posted. We'll
Yeah.
definitely be interested. And let me know when you plan on demoing it
Oh
too,
yeah,
because
no, yeah, I would have to tell you guys, right? I'd put it in the thing and ask like when can I demo it once I know that it's good enough to demo. Okay?
yeah, yeah. Well, I was gonna ping people too, because I know people will be very interested. So, people can,
Yeah,
yeah, so
that's a great idea. But it's like it's also what we're gonna do at CDCon, so it doesn't, you know what I mean? Like,
that's true. That's true. That's a good point. Okay.
yeah, but no, I'm fine with like pinging everybody and the people in the community having that heads up. So maybe they can say, hey, to their leadership, like, no, you should come see what this guy's doing.
Mhm.
So yes, I'm fine with the preview.
Okay, cool, cool,
Okay.
cool. That sounds good then. All right, well, let's like unless we have anything else, we can probably just wrap up. I have like I said, I have a couple other PRs, but I'll get that getting started guide, which is like the first slice of like the website updates.
Mhm.
But more's to come. And then like I said, that'll be probably like sometime next week.
Okay. All right.
Uh,
Well, good.
that sounds good. Well, thanks again, Denise. It's good talking to you.
All right. Good talking to you too,
All
sir.
right.
Bye.
Bye.